welcome to all of you. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to host such a timely discussion. So thanks to Bill Gates for a very stimulating book. I have to say I love many TED Talks, especially being an evolutionary biologist interested in virus. But I won't mention those that you know, but maybe one that you don't know. It's one about someone that wants to spread a virus called the ICANN virus. It's a virus to empower students to make a difference in the world. So, you know, this is the sort of things that we try to do in this very place. We started around tables that were hardly bigger than these ones, and we've been doubling in size every 18 months in the last 20 years. So now we can host, you know, such a nice crowd and a relevant conversation today. So this is a place that was designed by students for students, so that they can do things here that they cannot do elsewhere. And given that there is so many things that you cannot do elsewhere, we've been attracting ever more students. And we've had the privilege of, for instance, this very building belongs to the city of Paris that donated to us for the next 55 years. It was fully renovated by the Betancourt Foundation, thanks to a donation that they gave us, and they've been supporting us since 2006. So we have had, you know, the luxury of being able to explore here. So, you know, my role as the Chief Exploration Officer of the Learning Planet Institute is to explore new way to explore new way to learn, explore new way to do research, explore new way to do lots of things that are relevant to today. I don't know what's your impression, but lots of people feel that today we have more problems than we can solve. That, you know, the problems are growing faster than our ability to solve them. So fortunately, there is, you know, people like you that are trying to reverse that curve, but there is so many global challenges that they are scary for lots of people. And when people are scared, they have anxiety, they have violent reactions, they have all sorts of things that includes even more problems. And so, you know, I think between the US and France, we are all inherited from the Enlightenment, the feel that, you know, progress can come from democracy, from science, from education, from culture. But today we have neo-obscurantists that are threatening the very basis of the Enlightenment and the very basis of our democracies. And I don't know about you, but, you know, when the lockdown started, I was on the very top of this building here, and I felt that I reminded myself a quote from Confucius. You know, Confucius was saying we have two lives, and that your second life starts when you know you have only one life. And I don't know, you know, if any of you enter in that stage, but I think that maybe humanity is entering in such a stage now. Certainly our democracies are. And so our very institutions are under threat. And so we have to reinvent them. Because as an evolutionary biologist, what I know is that if you evolve slower than the challenges of the world, you're going to become obsolete before you know it. And universities are very interesting places. You know, they have the academic intelligence, they have the youth creativity, they have the need to do something for the community where they belong. But I think they could be labs of the future, but unfortunately, they are not evolving that fast. I don't know about you, but, you know, since I was in university, I didn't see that much change. And in fact, university do research on nearly everything, but not on themselves. So here we try to, you know, do a sort of R&D of, you know, what the future of university could be. And that's why, you know, we've been doing a few things, and we collaborate with ever more people across the planet. You know, we have hundreds of organizations that we collaborate with in the Learning Planet Alliance that we've launched with UNESCO to reinvent these ways to learning to care for oneself, to care for others, and to care for the planet. And I think we need ever more of this. And so we are trying to do this, and, you know, we try to say that, you know, the Enlightenment, in order to be revived, it has to be maybe modernized. It has to be more inclusive. The Enlightenment wasn't very inclusive. If you were a woman, you know, it's mostly white men enlightening each other. If you were a young person, you were not necessarily part of the enlightened community either. And to this date, you know, you're still not a citizen if you're below 18 in this very country, for instance. So, you know, how can we train global citizens if they cannot vote on the topics that make them so anxious? So, you know, we have to find ways to remobilize them and to make them part of the solution and not victims of the current status and the dominant forces that unfortunately are damaging the planet faster than they can be recovering. So that's the sort of things that we are trying to do here. And so we are very, very happy to be able to host this amazing panel and this very timely conversation, because clearly we still are during a big pandemic and there is lots of lessons to be learned. And thanks for this wonderful book that is an amazing summary of what is known, but also all the challenges that are ahead of us. And I think that we definitely need a lot of collective intelligence, mobilizing not only every country, but also every discipline, every walk of life, so that we can together hope to be able to achieve the best way to prevent the next pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, François. Let me add a few words of welcome in the name of the Paris Peace Forum. I'm Justin Weiss. I'm the Director General of the Forum. When COVID came 2 years ago, I was very ignorant of all things pandemics and outbreaks and epidemics, etc. I'm actually part of the 90% of viewers who watched Bill's 2015 TED Talk after COVID came rather than before. So I was not warned properly. One aspect of that tragedy, however, struck a very familiar chord, the contradiction between, on the one hand, the global nature of the challenge and the fragmented nature of the response and the jurisdictions who had to take care of it. Clearly, COVID was an eye-opener for many people about the need of some sort of joint response, some sort of global governance, something that is our bread and butter at the Paris Peace Forum. Just a few words on the forum. So it started as an annual event in 2018 dedicated to improving worldwide coordination on issues like climate, global health, precisely digital issues, etc. And it had 3 strands of DNA. One was to be multi-actor, to have the NGOs, the foundations, the local governments, the private sector, on top of the prime ministers and presidents that we have. The second strand was to be north-south, because if we were to talk about global issues, we needed to have a truly global conversation, not just among Westerners. And the third one was that we had a bias towards action. It's not a conference. We're not gathering people just to do plenaries and roundtables, but really to launch initiatives and projects. In November 2020, during our third edition, so the year of the COVID, we helped gather global resources with the help of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I must say, for vaccines before any vaccine was approved. And we organized a political gathering of all the principles for Act A, which was the main political response, trying to bridge the gap between fragmentation and globalism. Then the November event grew thicker, and we became a permanent policy platform, and our dedicated health team is now working on several aspects of that, including pandemic preparedness, working on the political conditions for governing early warning and response systems, given the basically political contradiction between sovereignty and joint action. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing Bill on this aspect, among others, because as you've understood, we're really a policy organization. More generally, we are designed to address the political questions hindering joint action, and trying to improve that. A few words of welcome, and I'll be out of the way. So first of all, our thanks go, of course, to Bill for the book, and to the foundation, to Joe, to Anya, to the Paris office, of course, for our cooperation and your support. Thanks to François for hosting us in this beautiful building. That was a great idea. And of course, thank you to our speakers today. And so I will briefly introduce them and suggest that they come. Dr. Samba, who is the director of the Center for Vaccine Development and former Minister of Health of Mali. Dr. Ilona Kickbusch, who's chair of the Global Health Center at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva and member of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. Dr. Sylvie Briand, who's the Director of Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness and Prevention at the World Health Organization. And finally, our own Spring Gombe, advisor for policy and partnerships at Market Access Africa, but also from the Paris Peace Forum. The floor is now yours.
I think my mic is live. That's great. It is my privilege to be here among you today, you, the policymakers, who will execute the recommendations that are being made in this book and others, and who have carried us through this pandemic for which we were all unprepared and in which we all made mistakes, from which we hope to learn. And that is very much what was the focus of Bill's book. Bill, it's a very timely book. It's needed. It presents recommendations for the future. In reading it, I observed that you wrote it in very accessible language, but many of the recommendations were directed towards policymakers. So could you tell us a little bit more about your motivation and what you would like to see from this audience and the wider public?
Well, a lot of challenges humanity faces, you have small examples that keep you alert. And you have lots of fires, small earthquakes, unrest. And pandemics, on the other hand, particularly if you look at pandemics that reach rich countries, happen very rarely, thank goodness. There's lots of reasons to think that the risk per year is up pretty substantially from the past. So there's a reasonable chance we'll have another sometime in the next 20 years. But it's easy to not dedicate resources to things that don't happen very often. Even at the CDC, who has such deep expertise, most of the pandemic people were off, working on listeria, salmonella, E. coli type things. And so when the big one hit, we found ourselves unprepared. When I was doing the book, I was looking at countries that had better pandemics than others, places like Australia that will end up with about 10% the death rate of all the other rich countries, and a little bit of preparedness went a long way. So, I think this year's a good year to have the debate. Hopefully, the framing I've got about an R&D agenda, health systems, and then the global group, which I call GERM. Hopefully, that starts a discussion, and the world isn't so distracted by other things that we don't take some steps to be ready to stop outbreaks and therefore avoid the incredible tragedy we've just been going through. And we're still in the tail of that could even surprise us in a negative way, but we're a lot smarter now than we were in 2015, when a lot of experts, not just my TED Talk, but almost everybody worked in infectious disease, was hoping that Ebola, although a very different kind of outbreak, would sort of get the world to invest. Not much was done, but I'm confident that this time we'll put a plan in place.
And that plan, it is evoked in the Global Epidemic Response and Mobilization team that you're proposing. Tell us about that. What does it look like?
Well, we need to practice. I think the analogy I used at first when I talked about this was the military and how they do war games. But that's pretty abstract for people. The analogy that I think is easier to understand is the way we practice for fire. We train people, there's exit signs, and we put lots of fire hydrants around. And we have full-time firefighters that do very little except practice being ready for fires. And the world over time has this incredible record. The deaths from fires, economic damage from fires is drastically reduced. And, you know, fires even in without preparation aren't nearly as bad as pandemics. That is, they won't go global, particularly in an era where you have so much international travel. We were a little unlucky in 1918 that there was a demobilization, so you had slightly higher levels of travel than in normal years. Today we have 20 times the level of travel that we had in 1918, just year in and year out, and of course that meant that COVID came out of China and got to a lot of countries very quickly. A few responded well. You know, Taiwan is maybe at the top of the list. And weirdly, they have more travelers back and forth from China than anyone else. So it's not that, you know, it's just the super distant countries had more time to respond. So, you know, citizens expect experts to think these things through. You know, the total cost of germ would mean raising the WHO budget meaningfully, but you know, I think most people think the WHO is funded to do germ-like work already. Certainly in most of the movies about pandemics, you know, people are flying in and, you know, the models are immediately predicting and the data's getting out there and the diagnostics are just ready to go. And, you know, partly through laxity, we don't fund the WHO to have that kind of team. We have a lot of lessons from smallpox eradication, from the polio eradication effort that's ongoing. You know, there's a lot of expertise that could pull this thing together. But it takes some resources, and it can't be done by philanthropy. This has got to be governments, you know, at a global level, under the leadership of the World Health Assembly, deciding that everyone is going to practice, everybody's going to make data available. So, you know, it's a governmental thing that, you know, sadly was missing.
Okay, so let me put this to our panelists. It's a governmental thing that's missing. Everybody's going to have to be involved in making the policy and executing that. Perhaps I can start with you, Samba. You were Minister of Health in Mali, where policy, you know, the rubber hits the road. First, can Mali react in such a way that germ becomes a reality? What might be needed? And if you could, in making your comments, also reflect upon how you think this recommendation would resonate with the populations you serve, who in this pandemic, unfortunately, belong to the populations who were missed.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. You didn't train us before how to use the this
I'm a
is
terrible moderator.
part of the germ procedures, SOPs. Thank you very much anyway. You've been such a great job. Allow me to thank the audience and to thank yourself and to thank this absolutely fantastic, wonderful communication team from, I think, Bill Melinda Gates Foundation. Really very impressive since a few weeks ago in Seattle and all the way down to here, even if I somehow missed the UK part. I think they've forgotten that I've spent a few years there doing my master, my epidemiology at London School of Hygiene. They didn't recognize me anymore. Anyway, also allow me to thank, I even don't know how to call him Sir or Mr. But please call me Samba. Really thank you very much, Mr. Bill Gates, for inviting us and for giving us such a great opportunity. I would like to thank the panelists also for coming, all these great experts and the audience. This is the man who, very early on in 2015, during the TED Talk, it's been said earlier, been thinking ahead of us. He's even not a doctor. medical doctor. We are. We haven't done it. Somebody did it for us. And we missed it. We just didn't listen. And in 2015, I was actually I think I was Ebola coordinator and special advisor to the president. I was actually doing Ebola with Professor Delfreschi, who came to my country. We met with the president and with my friend here sitting in front of me. And with Yazdan also, I think he's in the room. So we couldn't think about that. And now, here's the same man. When we have a little bit of peacetime, he's trying to help us to think ahead about the next pandemic. We really we have to thank him for that. Coming to your question quickly, for me, preparedness, the next pandemic preparedness, the backbone is, yes, the book is talking about surveillance. The book is talking about innovative tools. Yes, but you can only do that if you have an already functioning system. Seth will agree with that. You have to have a functioning health system. That is the number one way, wherever you are, if you want to disseminate healthcare. That's one. It's not all about putting money, putting new tools, putting new devices, etc. But you have to have people there. And even before that, you have to have a robust communication team, because you cannot just come in a village, in a population, even in Paris, with new devices, etc., and just deploy them there, put them there out. You have to study, communicate, and better understand community perceptions around this. And then it comes to governments. You have to have government buy-in into this. And then, if there is something, type of reaction, it will be different reactions from different government, from different communities. But there is one common thing today that we can all say, that is pandemic fatigue. People are fed up with pandemics. You go out now, nobody's wearing masks. I mean, we are all tired of wearing masks. We have our masks under here or in our pockets. We are tired. This is common. And I also think that communication, as I said earlier, is key. I don't know, writing this book is one thing. We are all kind of, oh, he's right. After I finished reading this book, this is actually the very first time if I see such a document, even when I was at London School, these epidemiology books, I didn't read all of them. This is the very first time in my entire life that I went through it, because it was so attractive. And I think the cerise sur le gâteau part was this book tour. How did he get this idea? That's a fantastic idea. He could have done such a great job, put it in libraries, use UPS or DHL, ship them out, and that's it. Oh, we'll say, oh yeah, Bill, oh yeah, you read the title, read the preface, and then put it there. C'est tout. That's what is happening with pandemics. When Ebola came, we do something, then you put it there after Ebola. So I hope, when is the tour now? This tour is happening in Europe, maybe in America. I really hope that Africa will not be left out this time with this tour. When is the Africa tour starting? We want to have your fantastic communication team there. We really hope that these guys will not just stay here, and then Africa will say, yes, the book was there, we hear about it, but the tour, I mean, he went on tours, but Africa was left out because. We should leave those because out and fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ilona, if I may come now to you, your reactions and your reflections on what Jerem might be constituted to look like.
Thank you, Spring. I'd like to start by saying, and Bill alluded to it, I'm very worried. I'm very worried at the stage we are in right now in relation to pandemics, but in relation to global health in general. The Global Preparedness Monitoring Board was mentioned, and we consistently said with pandemics, with outbreaks, we are constantly in this cycle of panic and neglect. And already we have entered the neglect phase. That's why this book is important. It's drawing attention again to the fact that we must not neglect all the challenges that we have. But at the same time, the worry for me is that, as Bill rightly shows, we know in most of the things what needs to be done. We perhaps don't always do them in the right priority. We obviously don't finance them properly. But the fact is that in this whole approach, and also all the points that Bill makes, the issue is, will the political response happen? And the analyses we've had also of this pandemic is that the two defining factors were political decision-making and were trust of the population. Now, that's something, obviously you get good, you get bad politicians, but the trust of the population is something that you don't build in a day, you don't build in 100 days, like you might be able to build a vaccine, but where you need to consistently over time build trust in science, build knowledge of health systems, build health literacy. And we have entered a phase where all of this supposedly is not interesting anymore. We need, as Bill said, to do this, we need money. Give WHO 1 billion, it'll do the job. But if you looked at the negotiations around the assessed contributions for WHO and the member states, and there I fully 100% agree with Bill, it is countries that need to finance this. It is governments that have responsibilities. And it's not only the governments of the global north. It's the middle-income countries that need to invest in their health systems. Look at the statistics of some of the middle-income countries and how much they are willing to invest in the health of their population. 1%, 2%, if you're lucky, 5%. And I think, therefore, we need a functioning health system, as we heard, but you need a functioning polity. You need the responsibilities and the investments that are necessary. And Bill's list shows the way. WHO is going to publish a list of 10 points that are very, very similar for the emergency response and architecture. And I think we also have to address the distrust that this pandemic has brought into global health. Let us be honest. The vaccine nationalism, vaccine apartheid, as it's even been called, the lack of interest in the deaths in developing countries is something that has led the global south, if we use that term, to be very skeptical about suggestions from the global north. And we experienced that at the European Union, African Union Summit very clearly. We see now through Ukraine that the G20 is not able to reach decisions and that a lot of the suggestions around financing are not going to happen. So I think we have to analyze very clearly what is this political situation, how can we address this political lack of action, and how can we address the distrust in the global system. And I would have had one wish to Bill in relation to this book. Bill, I would have loved if you had written this book with a co-author from the Global South.
Thank you, Ilona. Sylvie. Sylvie, so your department charged with the unenviable task of marrying the polity, the practice, and doing it on a shoestring with a depleted health workforce. Your reactions?
Yeah, thanks a lot first for inviting me. I think it has been a very tough period for us. These last 2 years, I've had the impression being in a tunnel, like many people, because a lot of work. But I'm not so pessimistic as Ilona, maybe because I've been working in this field for many years, and I've seen, of course, there are a lot of challenges ahead, but there is also a lot of hope. I think the fact that we have been able to have a vaccine in such a short time, the many innovations that have characterized this pandemic. So I think we are not in a good place because the risk of pandemic has certainly increased, but we have more tools to respond to pandemics. And if you look at the pandemic of the 1918, at that time there was no antibiotic, no vaccines, no diagnostics, no treatment. And so I think now we have vaccines, diagnostic treatments, and much better systems to cope. But still, the risk is increasing because of ways of life, urbanization, more mobility. And so, because the risk is increasing, we need also to increase the tools we have to respond to such events. And it's not only the tools, I think it's the awareness as well. And that's why I would like to thank Bill for this book, because Bill is well known and so it's important. It's not any kind of voice. When somebody like Bill talks about it, I think people listen much more than if I talk about it, for instance. And I think this kind of book can help us also to escape this cycle of panic and neglect, which unfortunately, maybe it's due to human nature. And I was thinking about, a birth, delivery. Usually women suffer a lot, but then after it, they just remember the good things and they forget. And so I suppose maybe humanity is like this with pandemics. They suffer a lot, but then they want to forget and they don't get ready for the next one. But I really think it's really important to acknowledge the suffering we have been through those 2 years. Acknowledge also that, and this to echo what you said about germ, I think there is no health without a health workforce. And unfortunately, during this pandemic, while healthcare workers have done a fantastic job, I mean, they were at the front line, many of them lost their lives. Unfortunately, it seems that health systems are weaker than before the pandemic. And I hope that governments will understand that a good health system, you have to invest. And health is not a cost, it's an investment for the future. And so I really hope that this will be a shift in mentalities in many governments, and that they will suddenly consider that investing in health, as in education, is as important as investing in other sectors of the economy. And for me, I mean, it was a lesson also during Ebola. We lost a lot of doctors and nurses during this crisis. They are frontliners. I remember in Guinea, in the Donka hospitals, the entire service of internal medicine disappeared after this because they were the first one to take care. And in those countries, when you have one doctor for 10,000 or even 100,000 inhabitants, when you lose one doctor or one nurse, it's thousands of people who have no access to care. And so it's so important. So we need to protect those people. We need to give them personal protective equipment, masks, gloves. I think it's very important also to invest in water. I mean, many healthcare facilities in Africa don't have running water. It's not difficult. We should provide those kind of services for the health workforce so that they can be protected. And so hopefully government will invest in these health workers, not only in the south but also in the north, because we need doctors, we need nurses to take care of people. We need also many other people in laboratories. So the health system needs to be strengthened if we want to be ready for the next pandemic. And regarding germs, I think it's a very important concept, because indeed responding to outbreaks or epidemics is not a business as usual. So you need certain capabilities. So it's important to train people to be able to do it. You need also a certain mindset, because it's not business as usual. So people need to understand that maybe you need to have specific SOPs so that you can do things faster. And the mindset is also because when you deal with epidemics or pandemics, you are more interested in the result than in the process. So you need to accelerate everything so that really you can achieve the results you want in a given time. And I think the third thing that is for me very important and that the germ force needs to have is a certain set of values as well. Because, for instance, I think compassion is very important. When you isolate people, for example, at home, they are still human beings. I mean, they are not enemies. And so we need to provide them also with a condition that will enable them to accept these conditions, this quarantine. Because I remember in Ebola, for instance, some families were in quarantine and they didn't have food. And so they were starving at home. Of course, not spreading the disease, but some of them died just because they were quarantined. So I think this is the kind of thing we need to avoid in future outbreaks. And finally, I think the allusion of firefighting is very good. And that's why each government has to invest, because firefighters, wherever you are, you need a small team of firefighters close to your home. And then you need bigger teams of firefighters in big cities. But then when you have a big fire in a small town, then other firefighter team can come and help. And so it's very important that each country invest in this workforce for emergencies. And then if need be, because the outbreak is too large and or about to become a regional epidemic or a pandemic, then other teams can come and help and provide more support. So in a nutshell, I think this is what we need to do for the future.
Thank you. A lot of food for thought. And before I turn to the audience, before I turn to you for your reactions and your questions as well, Bill, apart from your instruction to write a new book, not that you don't have enough to do, would you like to respond to what you've heard from the panelists?
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be good debate within people like the panel where, global health is top of mind. How we make sure that in the broader political context where there are so many issues, I don't know how we make the breakthrough there. After World War II, the amount of attention to, hey, let's not have another war like this was, phenomenal. And basically all the Bretton Woods UN institutions were created out of that. And in many ways you can say, although we've had wars, we haven't had a world war. It's quite successful. So when I was thinking of writing the book, I thought, well, everything I'm going to say is going to be pretty obvious. Maybe it'll even be done by the time I finish the book. Now I would say the risk is on the other side, that even with the book trying to help a little bit, the attention might not be there. So, for all of us here, does this deserve to be on the agenda? Obviously, the panel has a strong view on that. And if so, how do we achieve that? The amount of resources involved, in some ways, are pretty small. I mean, $1 billion a year compared to trillions we lost. Even the R&D agenda, a lot of things in there are extremely beneficial, even when you don't have a pandemic. We need infection blocking vaccines. We need vaccines with duration. Those are tools we need for HIV, TB, and malaria. And so the spin-off benefits, even in the non-pandemic years, hopefully will justify themselves as well.
Thanks. And just to think about the full circle of that, the reason we have mRNA vaccines is because of research that was done 20 years ago for HIV and cancer, and the investments that were made at that point. So we don't know when we will need what we need. Very good point. Okay, let me start with our host, Francois, to take a question, and then we'll come to you, Dr. Berkeley.
Thank you for this wonderful panel. I love the analogy with firefighting. But for firefighting, you have firefighter professionals, but you have also all sorts of people that play their role, including kids that have learning experience that are related to this. How can we do something similar? How can we create? So you highlight not only one big challenge, but many sub-challenges and sub-challenges. They're fractal challenges. Can we create infrastructure that can help people learn to face challenges, so that when the next big challenge comes, we are trained to deal with at least local challenges that could be health challenges, but also climate challenges and all the other challenges that we're facing. So imagine if we had like a GitHub for challenges, or a Stack Overflow for here's the solution I tried in my environment, and maybe we can share it. So maybe we can build the collective intelligence infrastructure to face those challenges, because it's not just governments that have to be involved. It's everyone. You very rightly say, what about this kid that has to stay at home? How do we have compassion? It's not just compassion. It's, they should be part of the solution. They should not be just suffering from it as they felt very distressed. Mental health, for instance, is a very big issue, even bigger now because of the pandemic for the young people's anxiety. So how do we, create that sort of infrastructure that can mobilize collective intelligence daily, so that, even if it happens in 50 years, we still have the practice? Because unless we practice daily or yearly, why don't we have Olympiads for challenges? We have Olympiads for mathematics. We have Olympiads for sports. And I'm sure, you've highlighted so many challenges that are both for the big pandemics, but also for the local health issues that are, maybe they should be prioritized for at least the local ones. Okay, so the same way germ has priority first is big pandemics, and second, the rest of health issues, I think for the rest of the population, maybe it's just the opposite way around. They should be practicing, to care for oneself and for one's health and for your loved one's health. And then once you know how to do this, well, if the big pandemics comes, you can be more reactive, and you can be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem.
Thank you. Perhaps we'll take all the questions first before we ask Bill and the panel to respond.
So thanks to the panel for really a fabulous overview of many issues, and Bill for writing this book, and I agree, now's the time to really have these debates. The one thing, and I think there are many practical solutions in the book that can be done and certainly are cost effective and should be done. The one thing I'm struggling with is, in this pandemic, first of all, we've done much better than in previous pandemics. Today 45% of people in the lower income countries are covered with 2 doses of vaccine. Vaccines went out quickly. They were made even quicker than had ever been done before. The thing that I don't know how to fix, and I'll use the firefighter analogy, it'd be as if you had a political leader, bad political leaders, who say, okay, there's fires around, I'm just gonna take care of my house. There's a big, forest next to me that's got lots of dry wood in it, but, that's not my problem, I'm just gonna take care of my house. And I think the challenge is, it is the job of political leaders to take care of their populations, their countries, of course, and we understand that. And people say you're naive and don't think that's gonna happen. Of course it's gonna happen, but at the beginning, we all said, we're only safe unless we're all safe. How do we get people to really understand that and believe that, particularly bad political leaders? Because it's so easy to fall back to my population, my country, keep all the resources, not just, in this case, the vaccines, but the supplies to make vaccines. How do we get to a place where the population at risk is vaccinated before the low-risk populations? And I think this is a really tough political issue.
Thank you. I'll take those 2 questions. So, how do we tackle political parochialism? And how do we get people who we shouldn't scare about pandemics, prepared as a basis of their lives?
Well, it's interesting, when we get a global disease like we have with HIV and now with COVID, it reminds people that the entire world is at risk. And so people in that one brief instance, they see the inequity. We have massive health inequity every day. Chemotherapies are not equitably distributed. We can make them better and cheaper, and we can do better. But for people who came into this epidemic, they go, "Oh my God, rich countries are actually hogging the vaccines," and they're like shocked. Well, where do you think the doctors are? Where do you think advanced treatment is? So it's been a little hard for me because people in global health, we live in a very inequitable world. It's less inequitable. I mean, childhood death, partly because of amazing work at Gavi and other tools like bed nets that Global Fund's been involved in. We've reduced global health equity, but it's still this huge thing. And so when people are shocked that we didn't get perfection on this one, a little bit, it's like, wow, where were you before the pandemic? You live this every day. So overall awareness about global health and equity. Will this help us? Particularly with all the distractions out there. When we raise money for Global Fund and Gavi, will we raise more in the next 2 years? Will we raise less? It kind of hangs in the balance.
Would any of the other panelists like to respond? Sylvie, please.
Yeah, I think this issue of inequity is not the first time. Unfortunately, during the last pandemic, the influenza pandemic in 2009, there was the same issue. But this time it was not enough vaccine and they arrived too late. Basically, it arrived in the south 1 year after any other country. And after that, member states of the WHO decided to adopt the pandemic influenza preparedness framework, and which is a tool, I think, that we have not seen yet how it will work for the next pandemic. But really the aim was to tackle this inequity and make sure that there is a certain percentage of vaccine, therapeutics and diagnostics set aside real time for low and middle income countries. Unfortunately, the PEP framework, as it's called, is only for influenza, and this pandemic was not influenza. So it didn't work, and I think we need to have a political agreement for tackling inequities during pandemic, because otherwise it will not happen. And then on the issue of collaboration, I think it's a very important issue, because indeed, pandemic, we are all on the same boat, but people don't realize that. And to foster collaboration, it's not something you do during a crisis, because during crisis, people are fearful. There is a lot of uncertainty, so even good politicians, they will tend to protect their own population first. So I think collaboration, we need to prepare for it. And that's why it's so important to invest in preparedness, because we need to learn how to collaborate. And because it's very hard to start collaborating when we are in the middle of a crisis.
Thanks. Ilona, please.
Yeah, I think first of all, one of the important issues that is happening as we speak is the negotiation for a pandemic treaty, for a pandemic accord. And first of all, that will keep the issue on the agenda to a certain extent, and it will try and sort out what kind of rules we want to give ourselves in the global arena. We have some rules already, the international health regulations, but they're quite old rules as well, and they have not been implemented so well either. So it is an attempt to push the agenda. What I find so difficult with public health, and in this case then the pandemic, that there is no civil society community out there pushing for it. Bill took the AIDS example. Why did we get all the things with AIDS? Why did we get the medicines, etc.? Because there was a strong community out there that pushed and pushed, that made it a political issue, that said, if you don't do this for us, for the people in developing countries, we are not going to vote for you. We are not going to stop making a noise. But what we experience with pandemics, and this is what we just heard from Sylvie, is, everyone seems to say, oh, thank God it's over, let's not. And I think really getting that push for health systems, for public health, for firefighting, and that links to your point about, how do we get people involved? And we, in a more abstract way, call that health literacy. But it is something that we need to get a different understanding of health in society. And we've not done that seriously. And that's why, to some extent, the pandemic divided us rather than brought us together. And the important things that Sylvie is working on with the infodemics is an example of that. I mean, I belong to the generation that still learned to hide under a desk in case the atomic bomb came. And we did all kinds of exercises in school. Yes, of course we can do that. But we need to have it present. And we thought that, in fact, in our part of the world, very different to the developing countries, we thought infectious diseases are over. But the last thing I want to say, let's not only think of the kind of outbreaks that are visible. We have a silent AMR pandemic. We have a real obesity pandemic. And they all interface, they all interrelate. And that takes us to the point that unless we start a real, also civil society movement, a political movement to invest in health, we are not going to move forward on these issues, because if anything, politicians need to be pushed, and we need to push them.
Okay, Samba, can I?
Yes, thank you very much. I will try not to repeat what has been said already, but just a few things. First of all, this book, I think, must be used not only for public, but for health schools, public health, epidemiology classes, and healthcare centers, preparedness teams. Because there are things in this book, you will never read that in a public health book or intervention epidemiology books, etc. I mean, we all agree with that. Two, this book, to me, is a great memory document. It's like they're calling us. It's like it's waking us up, because it's showing this big gap, the darkness between the top and the periphery. Now I see even better why I've been invited here. If South is not co-author, South is heavily involved now in the book tour, which is a kind of practical co-authoring. And I'm sure there will be next pandemics, as the book is saying, so there will be next books. We don't know in 6 days, in 6 weeks, in 6 years, we don't know. Something is going to happen. But the thing is, you cannot prepare the war during the war. There is no war during peacetime. You better prepare the war during peacetime. The best war, the best preparation is now. These firefighter services, you don't call them when fire is raging already. No. If you take me to go fight, I even don't know how to, I just couldn't manipulate this microphone. Imagine if it was a gun, I would have been already out. So important. And we have to have countries, low, middle income countries, especially Africa, early on involved. You cannot cook everything and call us as a Samba, come eat. Maybe I don't like it. Maybe I don't like it. You have to involve me, invite me early. We sit down together around a table in a meaningful, equitable way and discuss. But then, if I want to be treated in a meaningful, I have to put my hand in my pocket. Government must know, no matter how big or small is our investment, but it has to be there. Gavi is a great example of co-investing in countries. Seth can expand on this. The last thing also I want to say this in a kind of operational way. GERM must be done. If you want to succeed, we got to stop being jealous. Somebody said it before us. Somebody did this before us. We have to acknowledge and recognize it and help do it. Be part of it. GERM must be implemented. But GERM, to operationalize better, we have to do it from the existing and previous pandemics. We've done a lot of things with meningitis, measles, yellow fever, cholera pandemics. This was during my era. I'm a young person.
I see that.
It's just now. We have done that with my professor, Delfreschi, and Marie-Paul Kinney. A lot of meningitis with us in sub-Saharan Africa. And yourself, Seth, Ebola. And we created such a great community-based surveillance team with no PCR machine, with nothing. You talk to shepherds, you talk to hunters, you talk to people who are going to look for wood to make charcoals. You talk to youth association, women who are farming, and they will tell you, guys who will be running away from Guinea, for example, to another country, and somebody who is sick, I saw him laying down, vomiting, etc. Things like that. All of a sudden, I saw dead animals. We saw 3 today, we saw 4 tomorrow. So you can see that there is an increased number of dead, bleeding birds or monkeys, etc. in the wood. That's how you establish it. You need community brigades. And that brigades, you do not wait till there is an issue and you put it down. No, you prepare this ahead of time. You train Samba how to use a microphone before bringing him here.
I'll keep that
I
in mind
didn't
for
know
next
that
time.
I have to have a makeup. I have to get rid of my mask. These are things that we have to do in the community. Train people before. And then when you train them, you don't just do like what other people would have done with this book. Put in a library, and that's it. Work on the next book. So then, at the end, or publish. New England Journal, Lancet. New England Journal, Lancet. Who is going to read Lancet in my village? I don't have access to Lancet in New England because I don't have money to pay for that. So we have to be down. We have to stop dreaming and come on ground. This is really what I wanted to really echo and make sure that we use the existing Ebola and COVID operation that is already down there and build on top of that and ask country government to put down money.
Okay, everybody's got to come to the table. Everybody's got to invest.
But can I add
Please.
something here? I think this is very important, the different forms of financing. As we just heard, in countries, money has to be put on the table. But we have to change, if we want to deal with pandemics and a whole range of other global health issues properly, we have to move away from that development mind frame. We have to move away from a simple understanding of overseas development assistance. We need different types of funding mechanisms. We need to have an understanding what it means to finance global public goods. And we need to be willing to put down that money and find a new mechanism of making it available rapidly. Because even where we have created funds, they take forever, to be put in place when countries really need them. And unless we address this new type of financing system, which is something OECD is also trying to do, and ODA is a tiny, tiny bit of building health systems, a couple of %. And Bill is totally right. We cannot look to philanthropy to sort problems that are the responsibility of the international community. And this really has to be addressed very, very seriously. We had the small hope that, with this pandemic we were getting there, but it is really, really difficult at this point in time. If you look how difficult it was to get an agreement to increase the assessed contributions of WHO, the way countries are behaving is irresponsible. I think we have to say this loud and we have to say it clear. And again, I am shocked. I am shocked that the many NGOs out there who fight for so many individual diseases are not out there in the street to ask for better funding of the one global health organization that we have. And I think we really have to address this with great, great seriousness. Otherwise, we're not going to move forward.
Thank you very much. We unfortunately have to come to a close. It's been an invigorating discussion, and I think one that will continue in social media, in other fora. I'd like very much to give you the last word, Bill, on your aspirations, your hope in the immediate future of governments, your call to them. And then I would invite you all to join us for a quick cocktail. Thanks.
Well, global health, since the year 2000, has done amazing things. And the point about civil society being key to that, I think that's super important. HIV developed that. You know, could COVID, which we think of as a limited time thing, could we develop civil society, including young people around that? Maybe that'll help us maintain the vigilance. The broader we get the engagement, the more it's not just experts railing against the extremely limited resources in global health. HIV, not only did we make great progress against it, we actually used HIV to orchestrate resources for things like malaria and tuberculosis. So that is a positive lesson, and we have to apply it in a slightly different way around the pandemic, but I think that was a very, very good point that was made here.
Thanks very much. We close. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this discussion.